These lots of these points, sort of the difficulty in making sense of the world, who do you trust, this whole idea of heresies, links into the concept of the intellectual dark web. In some sense, if there is something that links many of the figures together, it's that they have been heretics to their own tribe.
Sure.
You sort of take Sam Harris and the Ben Affleck, or Brett Weinstein being kind of run out of Evergreen. What do you make of the IDW?
I think it's a very smart concept to try to corral a very difficult group of very disparate people into one orbit.
I think Jordan Peterson called it a herd of cats when I asked him about it.
Yes, that's possible. I think that there is some resistance to it within its own proclaimed membership. I think relatively few people say I'm IDW or something. I mean, I don't specially think of myself in this regard because I suppose I never particularly think of clubs of which I'm a member, or parties or movements or anything like that. So maybe it would be a movement for people who don't join movements. I don't know. Club for people who don't like clubs. I think it's got all sorts of inbuilt awkwardness, but I think it's also on Eric Weinstein, when he came up with it, I think he's definitely onto something. It's something like, I've tried to think about it, and I think it's something like people who have trodden on one of the IEDs of our time and have survived. Now, there's a very interesting question as to why some people set off one of the societal bombs waiting to catch people out, and everything is over and done with, and others seem to be able to do it and survive. But it's got something to do with being outside of the normal gatekeeping organizations, I think. Something like that. But the real underlying thing is this, I think, which is that it is preposterous that almost everything that is true is so hard to say in public and so controversial to say in public and so disputed and so howled against. I think everybody who's been described as a member of the IDW probably has, among other things, one thing in common, which is they all are used to being howled at for saying things that are self-evident, howled at in public, only to then discover that the public come up to them in private and say, "Thank you so much for saying what we think." And of course, that's one of the beauties of it. That's one of the beauties of technology at the moment, is that the gatekeepers, having just said that all the problems of not being able to appoint gatekeepers anymore, but that there's a whole set of things where the gatekeepers have sort of let everybody down, I think. And I suppose, I'm not saying that I or anyone else can do it, either individually or collectively, but it seems to devolve onto individuals to say and think about things that are of wider relevance than a lot of the gatekeepers think are questions we should be engaging in. I was very struck. Somebody came up to me after the event in London with Sam and Jordan and said they had a copy of that day's New York Times, and like page 1, 2, and 3, I think, were about something to do with trans. And this person said, "This is why people are here." I said, "I'm not sure they're here because of the New York Times running so much about trans, and we didn't address anything to do with that tonight." But I got what he meant. It was like, we're being given really weird, quite fringe stuff all the time as our diet, and we're starting to rebel.
And in the Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson debate, would you say that you were, I mean, you've talked about your concerns of what happens if we lose religion or religious faith. Would you say you're closer to Jordan or to Sam on that point? It sounds like you're closer to Jordan.
I'm slightly equidistant. I don't have Sam's belief. Let me put it another way, I don't have Sam's faith in the idea that if we just brush away the remaining bracken from religion, left by religion, that we get to this reasonable, rational world. And I wish him obviously well, not just as a friend, but I wish him well in pursuing that idea and winning. But there's an awful lot of historical examples of people trying something relatively similar and then discovering that they're right back at square one. When Danton and Robespierre are standing outside Notre Dame in Paris after the Revolution, and they work out that they can make this a cathedral of reason. You know, I mean, like, there's a lot about the pursuit of reason and rationalism that suggests that we're not great at it, actually, individually or collectively. Or to put it another way, that we can keep on doing just terrible things and sometimes newly terrible things. So that's an obvious prejudice, as it were, of my own. And yet I think that what Jordan is saying or doing with religion, which I think is extraordinary and admirable, and apart from anything else, quite amazingly multi-disciplinary. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about what he's been able to do, and what was a pleasure about listening to him and watching him in those debates. He was, one evening, I think, in Dublin, he just tried to only approach things from using biology. You know, and it's an amazing sight and achievement. But I'm not sure where that's going. I'm sympathetic with Sam when he tries to pin Jordan down, and Jordan gets out of the pinning down. I'm sympathetic to both of them in that. My own position on it, I suppose, is that I'm pretty willing to answer the questions that Sam would pose on, I don't know, Jordan, for instance, would find it, doesn't want to, won't, well, no, let me be. If you asked Jordan, do you believe in the physical resurrection? He would not say yes or no. He would do a brilliant extrapolation of a lot of thoughts. And maybe that is right. Maybe you shouldn't be able to just yes or no. I think in my own case, I can say I'm pretty confident it didn't happen. But I'm confident to say that it didn't, pretty much confident to say it didn't happen, and also say that doesn't mean that I'm going to follow Sam Harris into a world of pure reason and rationalism, because I don't think it's much more achievable. I think I've myself arrived at the position of believing you have to be careful on warring on things which have given you something of worth. And I respect Jordan's enormous ability and passion in trying to re-inject that particular part of worth back into the substructure of the society, which I think is one of the things he's managing to do.
Do you have any sense, I mean, you're sort of saying that we can't do without religion in some sense, or we can't sort of reinvent our own values. We've shown many times that we can't reinvent our own values. Do you have any sort of sense of how we kind of resolve that? Is it a new religion? Is it a new kind of...
Historically, it's the invention of a new religion or war. It's a pretty good time if you wanted to start a religion. Now would be a great time. Thought must have crossed your mind. If you were to claim, since no one's done it very plausibly for a while, but if you were to claim that you had yourself dipped the bucket right down into the well and brought up a bucket full of the real thing, you could do quite well these days. I think it's one of the... I sensed in the debates with Sam and Jordan, I sensed that it was one of the things that was constantly hovering. I don't know if you agree, but constantly hovering over the events. Jordan in London gave a very moving and spellbinding description of a conversation.
The sort of prophet nature of the two of them, you mean?
Yes, specifically focusing on Jordan, I think. I think that Sam's followers and admirers I think aren't expecting any kind of breakout beyond what he's said. I mean, there's lots more for Sam to cover and talk about, but I don't think there's anything they don't think they've... I don't think they think there's anything that hasn't yet happened, in a way. And I thought that when Jordan started describing in London a conversation with a figure of what he saw as God the Father, you could sense in the audience a feeling of, is something going to happen now? It was a spellbinding moment. But there's something, it just goes back to the point I was trying to make, is that a plausible attempt to reassert a set of very basic truths and claims that religions have always made, we're very ripe for that at the moment. And my own view is that we're quite lucky that some total charlatan and shit hasn't come along with enormous power already to do that. Maybe it's less possible in the modern information age than it would have been even in the time of the founder of Mormonism, but let alone in what used to be called the age of the prophets. But it's always there, isn't it? And if you have things like massive societal upheaval or war or catastrophic events, we're all totally available, aren't we? It's terrifying.
Returning to the IDW, it's been framed as an alternative sense-making network. And in that sense...
That's where I hear that said in the accent of the Weinstein brothers.
Yeah. It's very... And a lot of the people within it, Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, have created, Sam Harris as well, have created new media platforms distinct from the mainstream media as an alternative to the mainstream media. You're grouped within this organisation, or this loose grouping, but you're the associate editor of The Spectator magazine. Yeah. What does it say about the different media landscapes?
Well, I think a lot of us have a foot in and a foot out. I mean, I don't think any of us are, as it were, complete outsiders, and I don't think anyone has ever pretended they were. Jordan has spent his life with positions at some of the top universities in the world, and Eric is head of Teal Capital, and I've not been exactly silenced during my career, or at least not successfully, and have a large number of publications and mediums open to me, and I'm very grateful and lucky. But so I think that it's wrong to think of it as being an insider-outsider thing, or an establishment, anti-establishment thing, or something like that. I'm not certain that there's a massive difference between America and Europe or America and the UK in terms of this. I know that in Europe and the UK, the culture wars are fought slightly differently than they are in America because the area of contestation is different and the width of the contestation is different. And after all, there's a lot of stuff that we've sort of pretty much for good and for ill agreed upon in Europe that is not agreed upon in America. So I'm not certain there is any kind of transatlantic divide. What are you thinking of?
If what we're seeing in the US at the moment is that the centre cannot hold, there is a kind of increasing polarisation and a lack of agreement as to what even the facts consist of. Right. In some sense, in the UK, we have the BBC. We have some sense of a civic space that is not completely polarised.
Although, isn't it the case, everyone says so at the moment, that the BBC is coming in for endless attack and is actually feeling the attack, and I think it probably is, from the left and from the right at the moment. There's this, without wanting to get a bore on British politics at the moment, I mean, the anti-Brexit people think the BBC is pro-Brexit, the pro-Brexit people think the BBC is anti-Brexit, the Corbynistas think that the BBC is institutionally anti-Corbyn, and Conservatives seem to think that the BBC is giving Corbyn a great big leg over the wall of number 10 Downing Street. So
it's uniting people?
Well, there's a fallacy there which a lot of people at the BBC and others fall for, which is, must be doing something right since I'm getting criticised from both sides. And it's a fallacy, obviously, because you can be criticised by absolutely everyone. That's because you're totally wrong. It doesn't. There's a weird, by the way, can I point this out? There's a weird thing of what I think of as being equidistance-ism. It's an ugly ism. But where people think if they oppose something there, they don't quite know how they hold the ground they feel they're in. And so what they do is they get something there to the other side, and they say, well, you see, I'm standing between these two things. I'm very, very wary about this tactic because I've seen it used, among other things, against many of my friends and against me for many years. I remember more than a decade ago somebody writing from, as it happens, the Muslim Brotherhood in The Guardian, claiming that Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Martin Amis and me were merely the flip side of the coin of Osama bin Laden. And you'll notice what he did there. And notice that neither I nor Ayaan nor Martin have flown planes into buildings or told anyone else to do so.
Not been caught, anyway.
Not been caught, no. You know, it's so once you've seen it done to somebody or had it done to you, that kind of other side of the coinism becomes a very cheap trick. I pretty much resist it myself. You see it everywhere. Okay, we've found somebody who we can accuse of that from the left. Let's find somebody from the right we can accuse it of, and so on and so forth. So it's a sort of, but it's the sort of game that people start to play when they feel there's nowhere else to hold on to on the water slide. You know, let me get something from both sides to hold myself something like steady. So I'm not entirely persuaded that the media landscape is the defining or the distinct difference, but it probably is the case in Britain. There's less of the complete talking past each other than has emerged now in the US. It's possible. There is some agreement still about reality in the UK.
Do you have any sense, are you very pessimistic about this kind of increasing polarisation, or do you have any sense of how we pull out of this spiral?
Well, I mean, there's cause for optimism and pessimism, isn't there, as there is in everything. I'm pessimistic in the fact that I think that people are becoming so incredibly embedded and irrational in their embeddedness. And, I mean, are just able to say, it seems to me, absolutely anything now. I'm very pessimistic about that. I think I'm pessimistic about what I describe as a tendency to talk about each other and not to each other. I spent part of my summer touring Australia and New Zealand with Dr. Cornel West, the point of the engagements, for me at any rate, being that, and I think for Cornell as well, being to demonstrate that people from totally different political traditions could sit on stage for hours at a time, night after night, talking about important things, not dodging things, not ducking, but being able to have a rich and meaningful dialogue and sorting some things out, you know, which I think we did actually, between ourselves, if not for anyone else. And I'm very struck by how few people do that. And there's lots of reasons for why that's happened. We all know, and I'm afraid that the mainstream media has been a massive component of that strange, degrading tendency. But the thing that you can be optimistic about in it is that it's obvious that new things are coming through. I mean, and this is always the way, isn't it? I mean, you can berate and bewail, as I do, the YouTubeization of discussion that means that the BBC or ITV, or let alone some of the American networks, will get on one absolutely shouty, crazy nutter from one direction, then one absolutely shouty, crazy nutter from another, and call that a discussion. And that, I believe, embeds itself with a new generation of people who think that is discussion. You can bewail and bemoan that, but look, what we're doing now is a demonstration of the opposite, which is, it turns out, yes, that can happen. And it also turns out that there's a reaction to that, which means that there's an audience for long-form, often multi-hour discussions. I mean, so there's always both reason for optimism and pessimism in this. The thing I'm most nervous about is that we do need to find some way to agree on certain tent pegs. Certain lines. It's just very difficult as you're going through it.